Yeah, Heather, we got some breaking news that the House of Commons will not sit today as expected. The House is doing, of course, this historic debate on the unprecedented use of the Emergencies Act to deal with the protests and the blockades. But a note was sent out from the Speaker's office, that's Anthony Rhoda's office, telling members of Parliament that because a police operation is planned on Wellington and other locations in downtown Ottawa, given these exceptional circumstances and following discussions with all recognized parties, today's meeting is canceled. More information will follow. And Wellington, of course, is sort of the epicenter of the blockades in downtown Ottawa, Heather. That is the front step. That's the front porch to the parliamentary buildings. Certainly the House of Commons, where MPs have been meeting and debating this over the last several days. The police hardened their posture yesterday, setting up this hard perimeter. When I was coming in today, I had to go through 5 different police checkpoints to get to the office and show my ID at each and every location. So given those circumstances, the arrests of the leadership last night and the increasingly determined language coming from the interim chief of police, Steve Bell, I mean, the city feels like it's on the brink of the inevitable confrontation between these protesters and police there on Wellington Street. And given all of that, a decision has been made and announced by the Speaker of the House of Commons that Parliament will not sit today because of this anticipated police action right there, as you're showing, Heather, on the street right in front of the Parliament buildings,
where we've seen a protester actually shoveling out from the rig. So, David, just before I let you go, and we'll have you back through the morning. Yeah. So that's the House and Senate, both, and based on everything that you've been covering and with the wording specifically in that statement, does that lead you to believe that they really do think something's going to be happening today?
Well, a couple of things. The Senate was recalled to start sitting today. Mm-hmm. We don't yet know what the status of that is. That's in a separate building. That's down the road across from the Chateau Laurier, adjacent to the Rideau Centre in the old railway building. That's where the temporary Senate is being housed because of the renovation. So there's challenges there as well. A lot of the fireworks and the stages and the parties that you've seen have been happening right in front of that area. So we don't yet know about the Senate. We'll check on that. But the House of Commons is certainly suspended. But look, we've seen a very clear plan from police over the last couple of days. The leaflets, which started the countdown clock for people that police action was coming, they put up fencing, they've increased their presence. So there's a physical manifestation of their intent, and then tactical arrests last night, taking out Chris Barber and Tamara Leach, bringing into custody 2 of the leaders of this. They're trying to take the command of the protests out of the equation if they can, and sending all kinds of signals they're getting ready to move.
And one more quick question. Yeah. Does this decision not to sit today, does that affect the scheduled vote, which was 8 p.m. Monday? That isn't clear yet either. Okay.
I am being told, Heather, they're going to sit Saturday and Sunday. So read into that what you will, not today because of the police action being anticipated.
Stand by, David. I'll talk to you in a second, but I want to make sure I leave plenty of time for your colleague there in Ottawa, Rosemary Barton, our chief political correspondent, who is good enough to give us some time today on what could be a very significant day. Good morning, Rosie.
Morning, Heather.
So no sitting today in the House, so we won't be able to talk about what happens on day 2 of the debate, but I'm interested in your perspective on what we saw on day 1. The federal government and the Prime Minister having to defend invoking the Emergencies Act for the first time and the extraordinary powers that gives to the federal government. What do you think? How effectively are the Liberals and is the Prime Minister making the case that this was necessary?
I think they are doing their best with the limited information that they can probably give Canadians at this point. I do think that that's an important part of this conversation to remember that there is intelligence and details that we, of course, are not privy to. The government has made suggestions that there are right-wing ideological groups behind some of this protest. And certainly they point to what happened in Coutts, Alberta, and the seizure of a cache of weapons there as evidence that potential violence is possible. But that's sort of where the argument stops, if you will. The other piece of the argument that they added to that yesterday was the idea that if they shut down one blockade, it could move to another location. The fear that this could become a rolling protest across the country. Those things are all possible and certainly true. I'm not sure that they are answers right now that are satisfying, certainly the Conservatives, who have called the government's explanations to date extremely disappointing. It is right, I should say, for the government to face really tough questions on this. As you've said, this is the first time this legislation, this act has been used. It does give the government sweeping powers. They are limited. They have tried to focus the powers very specifically on events here, those financing powers that you were talking about with P.Y. Bourgeois. So you can can understand that the government feels that there's a case to be made, but it is important for this debate to take place so that we can hear, as Canadians, the government's case, and so that opposition parties can do their job to try and get a better understanding too. There is a concern that this could become something that is normalized, right? That is used more and more if they find it successful this time around. And so the bar is certainly high for the government to meet in this conversation. And over the course of the next couple of days, that debate will become really critical to understanding why this was seemingly the only solution.
Leading to the vote as scheduled, anyway, to this point, 8 p.m. on Monday night. So the vote on Monday, I think we could really tap into your expertise, Rosemary, because this is not sort of, I think Marco Mendicino used the phrase willy-nilly. This is not something that's just brought in and then just allowed to flow. There is parliamentary oversight. It is very much constrained in terms of time. Can you just help people understand what it is that they're sort of justifying, and then how it will be watched very closely by Parliament?
Yeah, I mean, it does go into effect as soon as the government makes the decision. So that's why you're seeing this action now. Certainly the suspension of and freezing of certain bank accounts that Chrystia Freeland talked about yesterday, that is a key part of this. And that, according to her, has begun. Some of these other measures, I think it depends on who you talk to, whether the police needed these additional powers to do what they're doing today or not. So the Emergencies Act goes into effect regardless of what Parliament has to say about it. And then over the course of 7 sitting days, they debate and then finally vote on the use of that motion. If the government does not win support in both houses for that, the act is suspended. They cannot continue with the use of those measures. If it succeeds, and I should say the NDP has said it will support the use of this for now. That means that the government can continue to use these measures within the Emergencies Act for a period of 30 days. So, I mean, that's sort of the technical part. The difficult part right now, given what we've just heard from David about the House not sitting, is how that changes things. What it might do, what might be interesting to see here, is that the police will move in because there is a completely different tone and feeling in this city today. And then the government maybe, doesn't need to have even the Emergency Measures Act. Maybe the vote won't even be needed by next week. I mean, that is totally possible that once this situation gets handled, perhaps the government no longer make the case that they need these special measures.
As I listen, Rosie, you make such great points. Just NDP support for now, unless it sees evidence of overreach, and 30 days, which could be renewed if need be. But they've talked, have they not, about hoping it doesn't even go to the 30-day point.
That's right. And there is also a mechanism in here, Heather, that forces everyone to review what happened. This is not like the War Measures Act. There are a lot of checks and balances in place. We know, of course, that there are already, of course, other groups starting legal challenges against it. That is all fine, and the government will have to fight those battles in court. But there is also a process in place around the Emergencies Act that requires that there be oversight of the government during and after the fact as well. So if there is a conclusion that this was not needed, that this was too far, the government will have to pay a price for that. I think it's important to remember here that this city was at a complete impasse. Just to give people a sense, yes, it's just the downtown core, but things are immobilized. Like, it is very difficult to live in the center of Ottawa right now. And it does seem, at very least, that the Emergencies Act has sparked some sort of police action. And whether that is a result of the police chief of Ottawa resigning, whether it's a result of other things, I'm not sure. But the Emergencies Act happened, and now there does appear to be some much more concerted effort to end this. So that certainly shows that something is happening. Whether it was caused by the Emergencies Act, whether it was needed or not, we don't know at this stage.
But as we speak, we're looking at it, and the sun is coming up. We're getting a better view of who is still in place in front of the Parliament buildings, and no immediate sign of police arriving on the scene, but we're certainly having our cameras trained there. We should mention Canadian Civil Liberties Association, the most recent to join legal action against the government, as they will have to justify those, as you say, in court. One final question for now, Rosemary, and you talk about the risks for the government. I'm just thinking, The polling is interesting as you look at a number of national polls. The Canadians do want the protesters to go home now. That's the phrase. And they even go so far as, even if it requires pulling them out of the trucks. You know, they realize there could be some difficult scenes to see, but they want this brought to an end. Strong numbers in support of that. What are the political risks for Justin Trudeau in this? Well,
by invoking the Measures Emergencies Act, he really took sort of the onus is now on his government and him to solve this. And of course, the part of that he cannot solve is the enforcement piece. He can support, but he cannot act. So he has to hope that this goes smoothly and that this gets wrapped up soon and quickly, because in many ways he has sort of made this his problem now as a government.